Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Writers on the River. My name is Jennifer Stewart. I'm the administrator with the Winnipeg River Arts Council, and I'd like to welcome you all this morning to our reading with Brenda McKenzie. Brenda is a well-known artist and art school teacher from Pinawa. She's got many beautiful works of art at the Pinawa Gallery and has been showing in art competitions around there. And she's entered to the author's world with her first book, Loving You. And I will let her speak more about it. And she's going to do a reading and speak about Loving You. And she's also going to speak about her current work in progress, La Familia, First Days to Beyond Tomorrow. I think I got that right, Brenda. I wrote it out twice to make sure I got it right. Welcome everyone, and Brenda, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And I want to also thank the Winnipeg River Arts Council for allowing me to promote my first book and preview my second one. So I'll start with the first book, which was called Loving You, and it looked like this. And this book was self-printed, meaning I'm an independent author. The Winnipeg company was called Art Book Bindery. And what I did is I just sent them the entire text as a email. And from there, they took over and put it into an actual book form with a cover, the title page, and everything, including the ISBN number. So then I had the task of trying to find my audience and sell as many copies as I could in any way that I could. The best way to do this was to go to actual bookstores, which in Winnipeg meant McNally Robinson, Coles, Blair's bookstore. And then I went to organizations I belong to, like a church organization, my art club group, Winnipeg River Arts Council, and gradually went through almost 400 books, sold over the 400, and I still have 37 left. So anybody who wants to buy a copy, just contact Jennifer, and I'll give you that address at the end. The book will be $20, and I'm going to pay the postage. So wherever it goes to, it's postage done. So in this book, Loving You, it has the main characters, and it is about the matriarch as the main character, the matriarch of the Stephenson family. She is in the first stages of dementia and has been in the hospital in a western Manitoba town, and is now released to the care of her son, Craig, and his wife, Adele. And they're preparing to take her nonstop to their home in eastern Manitoba. The plan was to have her think she was returning to her own home. In the book, Adele is doing the narration. I should tell you that what I'm reading is a bit of a cut and paste from an entire chapter, just so that we don't run out of time, as I'm going to be talking about two different books. So our trip back to Ellis gave Edie an opportunity to chat about all she had seen and done while at Twin Oaks. Everything she said agreed with what we had seen or been told by the staff. The more she chatted, the more my spirits improved. Soon she was picking out landmarks and telling us the stories attached to them. As we neared Ellis, she asked to go to the post office to gather her mail. "No, that's okay, Mom," said Craig. "We picked it up this morning. We're all set just to continue on to our home now." "Of course, dear. But as soon as I say goodbye to Barb and Gail, I couldn't possibly leave without telling them where I'm going and then when I'll be back." She put her hand on the door latch. Craig slowed down before quietly engaging the locking system. "Adele, what do you think? Do we have time for a quick coffee with Barb or Gail?" he asked me. I wasn't pleased that this became my decision. The trip ahead would be hours long. If we stayed too long in Ellis, we'd be looking at staying overnight and then trying to get Edie to leave with us in the morning. I studied the sky as if looking for help, and finally gave in. "Sure, let's take a break before we head out." Craig turned the car toward Edie's apartment. As soon as the car was parked in the garage, Edie was out and knocking on Barb's door. The squeals of laughter told us that the two women were already discussing Edie's activities while in Twin Oaks. Craig waved to Barb as she stood in her doorway with Edie. "Oh, come in," she said. "There's tea in the pot, or coffee if you wish. I'll let Gail know that we're back." Edie was beaming. Craig looked at me, deferring another decision. "Thanks," I said, "but we have a few more things to do tonight before leaving for home tomorrow. We'll see you later." I let myself into Edie's apartment before turning to Craig. "Well, that wasn't what I expected. What do we do now? What if she decides she is home for good and won't come with us in the morning?" I tried to keep my tone level. "Let's wait and see. Perhaps we can interrupt in half an hour or so and then get her into the car again." But an hour later, she was still in Barb's apartment. Knowing we had to spend another night, I began preparing dinner using food from the freezer and vegetables we had taken out from the refrigerator earlier. What we didn't use tonight could stay in a carrier bag and be ready for tomorrow's trip. After finishing her dinner, Edie stretched both arms above her head and announced she was ready for her bath. But first, she said, "I need to phone Ross and ask how my car is doing." She hadn't noticed that she was now using both her arms again. "Your car, Mom?" asked Craig. "Yes, dear. Ross was having it ready for winter. You know, you check the tires, change the oil, see if the wipers are in good use, all that sort of thing." "Really, Craig, you've driven for how many decades and don't know about winterizing your car?" Mom, let me phone for you. What if you help dry the dishes while Adele washes them? You know, two birds with one stone." "Oh, that's a good idea. I'll just go and get my PJs ready for later." She left the room. Craig raised his eyebrows and gestured towards me. Taking the hint, I called out, "Edie, why not wait for later? It's early yet. What if I put on the TV and we can see what the weather is like for our trip tomorrow?" Edie didn't answer. I tried again. "Edie, do you want to watch TV with me?" Craig moved to the telephone as I left the bedroom to see why she wasn't answering my questions. "Edie, what are you doing?" I stopped at the door to her bedroom. Edie was emptying her suitcase onto the bed. "Unpacking, dear. Goodness, I didn't think I'd pack so much. It's going to take me all day to put this away." She picked up a stack of sweaters and trousers from the suitcase. Just as quickly, I took them away from her. "No, Edie, let's leave them here for now. I'll just take out your PJs and your toothbrush. That's all you're going to need for now." I began repacking her clothes. She stepped away, positioning herself next to the wall. "Who are you? And what are you doing with my things?" I stopped and looked at her, and then slowly and softly addressed her. "Edie, it's me, Adele. We're in your apartment in Ellis, but we're getting ready for our trip to my house tomorrow." I waited for her reaction. "Adele? That's a pretty name. Why are you here? I don't have any money in the house." I moved away from the bed and toward the door. "Edie, wait here. I'll get Craig and he can talk to you." I left the room, whistling a sharp series of notes to warn Craig. He appeared immediately, but with the telephone in his hand. "Sorry, Ross, something's happening here. Can I call you right back?" He clicked off the receiver. Whispering, I explained what had just happened. Craig slipped into the room while talking quietly. "Mom, are you okay? What can I do for you?" Edie stared at him. "I don't know." She pointed her finger towards me. "That woman is taking away my clothes and won't let me leave my room." Craig motioned to me to step away into the hallway so I'd be out of her sight but could still hear the conversation. "Mom," he began, "that's Adele. She helps you. She plays cribbage with you. She does the cleaning for you. You like her." There was no response initially, but then, "I do? Has she been here for long?" "Yes, Mom, for years and years. You really do like her." His voice told me he had moved into the room to be near her. "Come on, Mom, let's go back to the living room and watch TV. Adele can tidy up this room for you." "Oh, yes, of course, that would be nice. I am so tired today." Moving into the hallway, she smiled tentatively at me, but held tightly to Craig's arm. I slipped past them and into the bedroom. As quickly as I could, I repacked her clothing before moving her suitcase into the other bedroom. Satisfied, I returned to the living room to find Craig in one chair, Edie lying on the couch watching the TV. Fortunately, there were programs to keep her entertained, and the evening passed without incident. And then Edie frowned slightly before looking at me and saying, "Have you seen my blue pills? I think I should have one before I get into bed." Craig waited for my response. "No, Edie," I lied. "Remember that the doctor said you didn't need them anymore? Your stomach aches have cleared up, so you don't need your pills anymore." "Oh, yes, of course. I'm sorry. Must be old age creeping up on me. Would you please run my bath? I think I'm almost ready for it now." She looked across at Craig before adding, "And maybe your friend there wouldn't mind getting this old lady off the couch? I'm feeling so tired and my legs just seem so heavy. Perhaps tomorrow I'll be stronger after a nice long ride and a rest in your car." I did as I was asked, and within an hour she was asleep in the smaller bedroom. Craig handed me a small gin and tonic while he sipped his scotch. Raising his arms, he said quietly, "Cheers. Should we play for a quiet night?" The purpose of that particular passage was to let you know about Edie and her switches when she goes from being lucid to being in her altered state. And it also tries to show how to react to people who have gone into their other world, being careful with them, being quiet with them, and not trying to force them to remember what's going on, but just to go with them for the time being. This book is about, I think it was 262 pages long. And it took me 2 years to write after about 3 years of keeping it in my head, and decided that the only way to get it out of my head was to put it into a book. Now, the second story that I have written is under the heading of speculative fiction. And that means an author will take a known historical event and then look at it from a slightly different angle with the two words beginning, "what if?" And then you decide, what if the main character had changed? What if the outcome had been different? Something along that line, which then takes your thoughts in a slightly different direction while still following what happened under the original event and how things altered because now you have altered the beginnings. So what I did is I took the events of Jerusalem in the year 37 AD. It's Passover time, and the Jewish population is coming into Jerusalem, which is now under the control of the Roman Empire. In this particular passage, you will meet three of the main characters in the first part of the story. There is Cornelius, who is the commander of the Roman centurion. He is a centurion in charge of the Romans who are patrolling the streets of Jerusalem. They are under the feeling that there's something going to be happening. There could be some sort of revolt. They don't know. They just know that something's going to go wrong. Cornelius, after the crucifixion, experiences an event that he cannot understand. And what he's looking for is an answer as to what happened and why did it happen to him. He figures his only way to find out the answers is to do interviews of all of the people he knows was there at the same time as he was there. And so he calls in two of his legionnaires, Lucius and Marcus, for yet another interview because he can't find the answers he's looking for. In the days that followed the crucifixion of the three condemned criminals, Centurion Cornelius needed to re-interview the legionnaires Marcus and Lucius. They'd been at Golgotha during the storm and then ordered to stay behind while the rest of the contingent had returned to the barracks. They had patrolled the tomb site. The reports had been brief. Details were missing that Cornelius felt could help him explain something that had happened beyond his own senses. Even though he had been in Golgotha and witnessed the deaths, something needed a more rational explanation so he could accept what had happened. Remembering the words of the woman Magdala, he had sought solitude by exercising his horse along paths which took him away from the hordes of people in Jerusalem. Controlling his mount kept his mind focused while at the same time allowing him to ignore his problem. But his hopes of finding answers through exercise didn't happen. His conclusion was to believe that either Marcus or Lucius held the answers he's wanting, but not forthcoming in their report of that day's happening. He was weary of hearing about the storm, the earthquake, the panic of the people, the animals. None had touched his own experience during the maelstrom. He strode to his office and ordered his scribe to find the 2 legionnaires and have them report to him immediately. As he waited, he cleared his desk and reconsidered the questions before dismissing the scribe. A knock at the door told him the 2 soldiers had now arrived. Leaving them at attention before him, Cornelius began, "For whatever reason you 2 continue in your belief that I will accept your shortened report of what happened at Golgotha. This stops now. And if torture is the only method to loosen your tongue, so be it. So for the last time, I ask you, what happened on the day of the executions and after?" He waited for the gravity of his actions to sink into their consciousness. Who begins? Both Lucius and Marcus looked at each other and began speaking alternately, the report gradually covering the time of the execution, the events at the tomb site. In all, it took about an hour of Cornelius's time. Many of the details were too fantastical for belief, but he let them continue talking and left their report uninterrupted. While watching them both carefully as they spoke, he had clasped his hands, squeezing his fingers into a tight fist. Then, ignoring the section of the report detailing their patrol of the tomb site, he continued, "But during the storm, you didn't see lights surrounding someone trying to calm a nervous horse behind the execution area? You saw no one with distinguishing insignia or identifiable clothing?" He kneaded his hands in agitation. "No," Marcus answered immediately. "It was dark. The winds tore our faces. We were more concerned with those directly around us. We didn't stop to look beyond where we were." "And you saw no one who was a stranger in his dress or his attitude?" The men looked at their commander as if deciding not to answer him, but they dared not to. In unison, they answered, "Yes, no, sir." Cornelius rubbed his ears, ruffling his hair with one hand, using the other to tap a rhythm with his stylus on the desktop. He spoke carefully, "You may leave. There'll be no further mention of the events of that day or of the days that followed. Are you clear the execution went according to our procedures in this matter? That the rest of what you have described as happening later could not have happened?" He pushed his chair slightly away from the desk. Lucius and Marcus nodded before giving their verbal assent. Dismissing them with a wave of his hands, Cornelius cautioned them, if asked, you will say nothing of what you have told me. Nothing you have said will appear in any report of the events during this Passover time. You were there to witness the executions and then guard the tomb. You did your duty. Are you clear on this?" The 2 men saluted their commander. "Then return to your barracks. Speak to no one. Wait for your new orders." And so this begins the first part of the story as Cornelius continues to look for the problems that he's encountered and looking for answers to something he's not quite sure about. From this time of the crucifixion, we have an all-female institution being formed. And now, 3 millennia later, in the year roughly 2037, this institution called the Way has moved into being a powerful worldwide religious, educational, and political entity. And it realizes also that its existence as an all-female-led organization is facing extinction unless they allow the men an active role in the administrative processes. And now those men are asking for this right. The story I'm telling you will follow themes of secrets and loyalties when fundamental ideas and relationships are being challenged by a new reality, global peace. The second part of the story goes to present day, roughly 2037, and we have the La Familia has been centuries old and has now opened up a whole new area of the world, what they call the new town, whereby people who have left the old continent have found a way to travel to this new continent and set up a new way of life, a new peaceful life that allows them to have their families, establish their homes, develop businesses, and gradually go from being a hamlet to a city, and still in charge of everything, the women of La Family. So I start the news story by having pages describing how this happened, how the refugees were able to make this trek, and the results of the trek. In it, they have areas of the book where it describes the problems that they've occurred as they had to rebuild or to build their society in this new area and what happened. So we have at the beginning now a woman who, with slow, measured steps, has made her way along the eastern parapet of the Familia school in this city of New Town. As the remaining nighttime air was still cool, she was pleased at her decision to wear her favorite cranberry-colored day suit. The day would be warm, but for now, she welcomed the comfort of the closely woven fabric. For nearly 40 years as a staff member, she had found using the walkway helped her focus her thoughts, which today drifted back to those two women who had begun the way, which became La Family, so many thousands of years ago. She concentrated on the names of these two women, Miriam Mary and Magdala, and then the recorded names of the earliest followers who had worked with them to spread the message of the way to all the women and girls that they met. Now, watching the sunrise over the horizon, coloring the sky with gold and pink as it dismissed the night's darkness, she allowed herself a slight smile as she recalled her history mistress, writing in large letters the names Miriam Mary and Magdala across the chalkboard before finishing her lesson with the admonition, "Now go and give thanks to our founders that we are still here to continue their work." Abruptly, she chided herself for indulging in daydreaming of what had been instead of directing herself to concentrate on her day's work and what was about to be demanded of her. She took a small piece of paper from her trouser pocket to reread what she had written. No doubt some of her fellow sisters would have teased her for using such an old form of communication, but for once she wanted to feel what she had written and not just look at it on her electronic communications device. Every sister now had an affiche, which simplified communications between them and allowed all communication to be recorded and archived as necessary. Her affiche was in her pouch purse, but she chose to leave it there for now. Unusually, today's schedule was dictated by one word, Esperanza. Carefully refolding the paper, she allowed herself a moment of sadness while wondering if today's ceremony of farewell and commitment would confirm the trust that the matriarch Esperanza had placed in her. She played with the silver Familia ring on her left hand turning it around to gaze at its surface, engraved with the F and the double M of the Familia of Mary and Magda. It marked her position as a senior member of the organization. On her right hand, a thin band of gold onyx designated her as a widow. Although she had been alone for so long, she rarely noticed this piece of personal jewelry. Both rings now slid loosely on her fingers, a sign that her body was now decreasing in size as it aged. Surveilling the town site and the newest buildings offering short-term accommodation to travelers, she wondered where all the guests were being lodged. Lights showed that the restaurants and cafes were opening for business. It was time for her to go to her room and prepare for the day's ceremony. In a secure chamber beneath the great assembly room of the Abbey of the Familia, the woman watched herself in a tall wall-mounted mirror. She had chosen to wear the standard staff uniform and her usual pouch purse around her waist until changing in today's ceremonial outfit. Her hair pulled into a tight chignon. Satisfied with her appearance, she turned to face a bank of monitors. Standing in the middle of the room, she had a clear view of the guests still assembling in the room above her. The chairs on the floor level appeared nearly filled, but the balcony area only half so. This didn't bother her. She knew the movement of the people would be delayed as more arrived who weren't sure of their place in this part of the room. In general, everything was proceeding according to the rules set for the use of the great assembly room. While changing into her white ceremonial gown, she mentally reviewed her speech and specific parts of the rite. And then, after a final look at the monitors, she turned them off. The room instantly dimmed, illuminated only by a small ceiling light. Behind her, the door opened as an elderly woman entered. "It's time," she said softly. She smiled gently at her and said, "Thank you, Caris. Your being here is a comfort to me." Sister Caris paused and looked at her. "You must address me properly as Sister Caris. Despite your temporary elevation, standards must be maintained." After a few more minutes with Caris, she gave herself one more look in the mirror, showing her dressed in the ceremonial garb of a robe, diadem, and a veil, with a pouch attached to a ribboned waistband. She looked to Sister Caris, who said respectfully, "Now, all is as it should be." The two women smiled at each other in full confidence that each was now prepared for the day's event. "Good, then let's get started." But then she hesitated before patting the headband holding Sister Caris's veil in place. "There," she said, "now you're ready as well." She followed Sister Caris out of the room and down the hallway. Moments later, she was at the back of the great assembly room. A bell rang its solitary note. Silence settled across the gathered congregation. Only the sisters stood. Taking a deep breath, Sister Ardis moved forward. From that point, you begin to read about the setup and how the Familia now operates. And we come against the problem of the men who have sent word that they would like to now speak about joining the administration. And so before any new person can be acclaimed as the lead of the Familia, there is this problem that needs to be dealt with. And the book continues throughout at this point, talking about what the women's side of this problem is, what the men's side of this problem is, and trying to work out some sort of a conclusion. So those are the two books. This book, as I said, is in pre-publication, as they say. And what I have to do now, once it's ready, is make sure that I have found the correct place to have it published. As I said before, if you do it yourself, if you self-publish, there's an awful lot of work that you have to then do to promote it and to put your book in front of your audience. With publication, this process is a little less onerous. And I'm hoping that a lot of the publicity for it will be taken off my shoulders. I know listening to the radio, seeing TV, listening to Canada Reads and all of that, yeah, you still have to be part of the promotion process. But I'm also of an age to know that I'm maybe not capable of doing as much as I did before when I was doing Loving You. My advice to those of you who are considering publishing a book is to do your research, find out as much as you can about as many publishing firms as you can, and then very, very carefully follow all of the regulations they have set out for publication. And then good luck, see what happens. So at this point, I'm going to open it up, and if anybody has questions they would like to ask me, feel free.
Hi, Brenda, it's Jen. Donna's put a couple questions in the chat here. First one was,
okay.
Did the second book require a lot of research, and did you go to Israel?
Did the second book require
a lot of research?
Yes, Donna, I've been researching for about 5 years, but not continuously. That was because at that point I was into my artwork, and I found I can't be creative in 2 ways at the same time. I attend the Catholic Church, so I understand the background to it, but I don't understand why they can't have women priests. So what I had to research was more about the time, what was it like in Jerusalem? What did the soldiers wear? What was the setup of Jerusalem? And I would go to places like Google, and I would find things like this. And this was a map of Jerusalem at the time of the crucifixion. So things like that to keep you on track. Keep it as much as you can, as authentic as you can.
And could you summarize the connection between the first section and the later section that you read at
The later section, the first section is setting up what the original organization was that the women developed after the crucifixion. And without going into hundreds of years of history, just suffice it to say that it became by word of mouth initially, and later on, as the women became more organized, they put other women in charge behind the scenes. So promoting a certain person who would be the king or queen of an area, put other women who could be influential, teaching the girls how to become diplomats, how to handle problems and things along that line. That story does peter out in a very specific way, which I can't tell you because that would spoil it. But then I switch over to the new time, and in 2037, there are references back to the original way at how things were done. Why are we still doing it this way?
Do you have plans for another book?
I would say no, only because it's my birthday next month. And when you look at all the candles on the cake, you start to think, how much time are you willing to put into the next idea you have? So probably not. But then it's like saying, I'm not going to do any more painting. And then I put out 6 of them in the last year. So you never know. So someone else has a question?
Just give me a second here to see if anybody has any other questions regarding La Familia. I don't want to jump around on them. Anyone else does, so speak up, pop it in the chat or unmute yourself. My question was back to Loving You. What brought you to write this book?
Because when I first started with it, if you look at your dining room table and then you fill it full of boxes, and each of those boxes is full of all the information you've gathered from all the places you've gone to, the people you've met, then you look at that and think, what am I supposed to do with all of this? Once we had found, in our case, our mother-in-law went into a care home in Beausejour, and it was a fabulous place. And they told us probably 18 months, maybe 2 years. But as it turned out, it was 9 years. And her dementia was not as a result of Alzheimer's, it was a result of several small strokes. And that gradually weakened her. And when she passed, it was because her body was worn out from coping with all of these strokes. In order to get rid of all the boxes, I had most of the stuff in my head, and I wanted to clear my head. So I started thinking up a story to explain all of this, and that's where the book came from. It's based on quite a number of actual events. Although, to be truthful, as I was writing it, I was talking with other people who were going through a similar experience, and they allowed me to use some of their experiences as well, just to give it a fuller range of ideas. Hi, Donna. Yes, I have done presentations with Alzheimer's peoples. I did go to senior care homes, 1 or 2 of them. My best reception was going to church groups. They're very committed to helping people, I suppose, within their administration. And they're also, most of the people at church, the churches I went to, were the same age as me. So I knew there were probably a fair number there who were looking for answers or were coping with the same thing. And I think more curiosity as to how my book was similar or not to what they were doing. I did find out at one point, having done my reading, I sold 28 books just to this one church group, was absolutely amazing. And then I went to other medical places to see if they would be interested in reading them. Brandon General Hospital, I had a time there talking with people and explaining my book there, because we did take her there for a psychiatric evaluation. So that's how that happened. I know we've got other people out there. Hi, Peggy.
Anyone else has any questions? Go ahead.
That seems to be it. So what I did for you is, this is the address if you want to purchase the book. Can you see that? There it is. So there's the www to get the book if you would like it. And the other one is called La Familia. So LAFAMILIA, first, meaning the number 1 ST, days to beyond tomorrow. And if you look at the title, First Days to Beyond Tomorrow, you can see the 2 halves of the book. And would I do a second printing? If there was a demand, I would have to buy 100 copies of the book in order to do a second printing. So it would have to have a demand for that many more books. Okay.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, everyone, for attending. If anyone has any questions, you can direct them to the Winnipeg River Arts Council. I can pass them on to Brenda. I'll pass on her email address if anyone likes. Put you in touch in regards to her book. Thank you very much, Brenda. That was it was really nice. It was nice to hear you read to me. I haven't had that happen before.
It's nice to have.
You've never read me stories before.
It's nice to have international help, because I know that one of the people listening is down in the southern United States in the sunshine, in the desert. So that sort of is a nice perk from there. And I hope to have some good news within the year that it's done, it's ready to go somewhere. We'll find out.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. Our next Writers on the River is this coming Friday, again at 10 a.m. and it will be with Mary Louise Chow. We also have Michael Luke on March 25th, Verla Forte on March 30th, and Donna Bassell will be doing a reading when her and I can get a date and time scheduled as well. So just follow our Facebook page, or you can email me if you're interested in those and I can help connect you. Thank you very much, Brenda. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.